So today we're going to be covering this guy.
Oh, look at it. Looks pretty handsome, Hunley.
Yep. And this is an important shot because this was provided for the book Poisoner in Chief by the CIA. So this is actually contemporary of the 10 years time period that he's most famous for.
Right. I just want to say something about the book Poisoner in Chief by Kinzer. Kinzer took literally word for word out of John Marks's famous book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. So Kinzer has been criticized and might be deep state. He teaches at Brown University. He's a sketchy cat. But in general, he's lifted all of the research of John Marks.
I was wondering about that because everybody's saying he was so obscure. And I'm like, well, John Marks was talking about this guy because I have the John Marks book.
Right. Yeah. You could find phrase after phrase after phrase lifted. Now, he used all of his students, Kinzer, to do the research on the book, his book, Poisoner in Chief, which came out like 2 years ago or something. Right. Right. But if you look at it closely, if you look at John Marks's book, which John Marks, obviously a legend in CIA research, a legitimate dude, Kinzer's very sketchy. Marks, I recommend The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, The CIA and Mind Control, The Secret History of Behavioral Science. That's the book to read. And it's got an introduction by Tom Powers, who did a book, The Man Who Kept the Secrets, which is also a interesting book. But Marks is the guy.
And this is John Marks here.
Right. He also wrote Cults of Intelligence. So he's coming at the CIA from an anti-70s CIA point of view. And Kinzer, if you watch his lectures, I'm sorry to go off the rails here a little bit.
No, that's fine.
The book is what we're going to talk about, or the stuff in the book, not the book itself. But Kinzer mocks the idea, and I think this is the reason he's out there as a Brown professor and author. He mocks the idea that mind control is humanly possible.
Okay. Yes. Right. I've been wondering about Kinzer because I've been listening to his interviews, and I'm glad you said that because I was like, there's something kind of sketch. And another thing that made it really sketch was this. When he was interviewed about it, he was talking about how Gottlieb was so unknown that he talked directly to a former CIA director, and the guy said, I've never heard of him. And he mentioned that he was talking to, of course, a bunch of other CIA at the time. I'm like, like most authors are just going out, hanging with all the CIA guys and talking about their upcoming book. Yeah, that's just perfectly normal, as one does.
I know. And all of his students that went out into the hinterlands to find secret documents, because that's what students at Brown usually do for their professor. I mean, it's almost like a deep state team that he put together to put his book, Poisoner in Chief, together. And, you could look at it as a limited hangout by the CIA, Eric, throwing this guy, Sidney Gottlieb, under the bus, saying this guy was a rogue maniac and the rest of us are normal.
Yeah, now Kinzer actually did state that too, as it was well planned in the sense that because Gottlieb did this, burn documents, things like that, he was a perfect setup that Colby later on could bring people to the White House and apologize and say, oh, yeah, this guy's out of control. Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, well, that's what they do. I mean, that's called a limited hangout. So there is plenty of great, obscure factual information in Poisoner in Chief. Unfortunately, it comes from John Marks's book. I don't know if John Marks is alive or suing Kinzer or what, but if I was John Marks, I would look into it, because it's kind of like
Marks is alive.
Oh, great. I hope he sees this because his book is a masterpiece. It's kind of like when, what's his name, Roger Stone usurped the work of Philip Nelson to do his book on LBJ killing Kennedy. I don't know if he gives credit to Nelson or to whom in that book.
He gives to Caro for sure.
Right. I don't remember if he gave it to Nelson because Nelson is who he's usurping in his book, not to begrudge Roger Stone, but it's like a greatest hits album of of LBJ JFK research, the Roger Stone book. It's just like a Cliff Notes version. And Poisoner in Chief as well. I don't know why Poisoner in Chief came out of the blue 2 years ago as a book. I don't know why all of a sudden. He's got a bunch of books.
Because of Netflix, Wormwood, I bet.
Right, absolutely.
I'm thinking that might have been like, hey, let's go for that.
That being said, Wormwood is my pick of the week for film viewing on Netflix. A 6-part mini series directed by the legendary Errol Morris, who did Thin Blue Line, Fog of War, and a bunch of other documentaries. This Wormwood is so crazy that he combines documentary footage and documentary interviews with a movie within the documentary series, if that makes any sense to anybody, with really A-list actors who were acting out scenes in the movie discussed by the people being interviewed. I've never seen it. It is a masterpiece of cinema that has never been done before by Errol Morris. It's never been done by anybody. It's combining documentary with A-list docudrama acting. And it's about Frank Olson. And Frank Olson's family is in the movie itself. Now, Frank Olson's family will later meet with Gerald Ford in the Oval Office with Donald Rumsfeld and others to get an apology from Gerald Ford for having their father and husband dosed on LSD and a bottle of Cointreau while working as a CIA contractor in a resort, a cabin, basically in the woods in Western Maryland. The cabin in the woods was a place they went for the weekend. CIA operatives, ostensibly to dose each other. Really, I mean, the LSD experiments that they did them on themselves as well. Frank Olson. I don't know. Yeah, that may be them doing some hijinks, some LSD hijinks.
No, it was two of the doctors. The guy on the right, I forgot. He was a pediatrician. His name is Kurt Pfeiffer, and this other doctor here, Dr. Harry Williams. That's him He's literally squirting it into the guy's mouth. Yes, that was them.
Right. Well, in the case of Frank Olson, he was dosed in a drink and did not have a good trip. Now, Frank Olson goes back to we'll get up to a little bit up to speed of Frank Olson a little later, but Frank Olson goes back to the University of Wisconsin, where both Gottlieb and a guy named Ira Baldwin went to school, and Ira Baldwin was the head of the department there. And what Gottlieb studied was agriculture. He majored and got a degree in agricultural studies. And is this Baldwin or?
Yeah, Ira Baldwin.
Right. So this is a couple of years later with the theme that Hunley sticks to of finding the photos right before they die.
Oh, that's not funny. This is him with freaking LBJ, dude. What do you want?
But anyway, so what is that? Oh, that's the hotel? Or no?
Yeah, that's where Frank came out.
Oh, well, all right. Well, we're going to go back to we're back in 1950 and 52. Yeah. So when the CIA after the war, what they did was outside of Frankfurt, Germany. This is before Gottlieb is even with the CIA. This is post World War II. They had taken over an estate, chateau outside of Frankfurt. This is a chateau right here. This chateau outside of Frankfurt became a torture experimental drug center for the U.S. Army on Russian prisoners, indispensables. This is the place there. And this is where we used a lot of the techniques that the Nazi scientists had used, guys like Kurt Blome. If you have a picture of Kurt Blome was the biowarfare program director for the Nazis. And we took Kurt Blome under our wing. There's a picture of Kurt.
No, he's not creepy at all.
No. He was acquitted in the Nazi war trials at Nuremberg So why he was acquitted? Well, I guess somebody needed him. So he was acquitted. And as I said to you the other day, there was a Japanese version of him, Ishii, in Tokyo, who was also acquitted of the Ishii experiment. That's Ishii right there. Now, Ishii is the director of the bacteriological and biowarfare weapons program of the Japanese. Now, he has slides and petri dishes full of biocrap. And what we did was we took him, interestingly enough, Ishii negotiated amnesty for his entire staff of mad scientists, and was given amnesty for himself and his staff of doctors if he would turn over all of his research to us, which he did. It was then shipped to Fort Detrick, Maryland, which became the first biowarfare center in the United States. Fort Detrick is pretty close to you, Hunley, I imagine.
No, it's closer to DC. Yep. That way.
Closer to DC, but nevertheless, Fort Detrick in the woods of Maryland becomes the first biowarfare center in America. That will later be sent to an obscure place called the Ukraine, but that's a story for another day when they say this stuff's got to leave the United States, but that's not till 50 years later. But in 1950, 51, 52, we've got the Korean War going on. And during that Korean War, we may or may not have used biowarfare weapons. We're going to get up to that in a second, but we're still back in a post-World War II environment where we begin to use the Nazi techniques on undesirables. Let me just put it that way. Prisoners, Russians, Germans, Nazi, whoever the hell we can. This is another shot of Ishii or something?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Okay. Getting away from Ishii for a second, the Ishii, his stuff is shipped to us. So we now have our own bio warfare program we're building.
But he stayed overseas and kind of worked remotely, whereas Blom came here.
Yeah, a lot of the Nazis came here because they had no place to go. The Japanese could stay in their own country. The Nazis had to leave. Okay, a lot of the Nazis just went back to teach and stuff like that. But the high-end Nazis had to flee. And there's obviously Operation Paperclip, which we discussed before. But Operation Paperclip, if you get into the weeds on it, is a battle between the CIA and the State Department. Because the State Department is vetting all of these Nazis and becomes the nemesis in this particular genre, becomes the nemesis to the Army and the CIA. And why do I say the Army and the CIA? The Army and the CIA combine at Fort Detrick the CIA shops around to see who will help them with this biowarfare program. And the Army raises their hand and says, okay, we'll do it. And that's how it ends up in Fort Detrick, Maryland. So the Army, the Pentagon, is now the conduit for the CIA in terms of a biowarfare program that they're developing. So there's a battle between the State Department and the CIA and the Pentagon about vetting these cats. Some of them flee to South America on the rat line through the Vatican. Whatever happens, Klaus Barbie ends up down there. Different guys end up down in South America. But the ones that the CIA gets through actually live in New York and get apartments. They're given apartments, they're given phone numbers, and they're guys like Kurt Blom who come in through Operation Paperclip. Now, I have made the argument for many, many years that the morality of the United States, foreign policy, domestic policy, were influenced by the input of Nazis coming into our government through Operation Paperclip. I now believe the same thing happened with the Soviets, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the input of these hardcore Soviets coming into the United States and influencing the domestic policies and foreign policies of the United States, as happened under Operation Paperclip with the Nazis. This has been discussed by others with some books that are out there recently. The Soviets, I think, did the same thing with the Democratic Party, but that's a show for another day. The Nazis under Paperclip begin to come in here and begin to influence the CIA in relation to the Soviet Union in terms of they believe or were told to believe or were influenced that the Soviets and the Chinese had a mind control program. Okay, why do we think that? Well, it brings us back to Tusco the elephant. It brings us back to another episode with Jolly West. And it brings us back to the prisoners who come out of Korea, Eric, after the Korean War. And they are, and this
And this guy.
priest, excuse me?
Yeah, and this guy.
Right. The priest from Hungary who is given a televised trial, and the CIA believes that he's been brainwashed into confessing crimes based on their body language analysis, Eric, if they had that back then.
It was his demeanor was flat, kind of out of focus, very robotic, and the question is, and again, Kinzer talks about it a bit, but they were probably using the traditional stuff of sleep deprivation and all, all the old tricks that really worked pretty well anyway.
Right.
But either way, they said, oh, it must be mind control because
Mhm.
he confessed to all kinds of things. And it went right in line, I think, later, especially with the Korean War vets and then Lifton and that crew.
Right. So what happens with Jolly West and our friend from the RFK case, the other doctor, Eric, of whose book you have, The Chosen Ones, right?
Yep.
There's Jolly West, and then we have another doctor who may or may not have used mind control on Sirhan, which I believe McNeil of Chaos is writing a book about. Oh no, he's writing a book on Jolly West, or
Jolly West. He's
yeah,
doing Jolly West. Yeah.
he's doing Jolly West, but he believes that Jolly West was involved with Sirhan. I disagree. I think it was the other doctor from the Chosen Ones. However, they're both involved in deprogramming um, the Korean POWs, our guys, when they come back. Now, what did these guys do? They made statements against the United States. They said they were aware of biological weapons that we used in Korea and bacteriological warfare. That was the essence of the Japanese program. In other words, these weapons were used pretty quickly, and they had all the earmarks of the Japanese program. And the reason the Koreans knew that was they knew the Japanese program. They knew about Ishii's work, and so did the Chinese. So because they were victims of it, Eric. So
Big time victims of it.
when they talked about hemorrhagic fever and other bacteriological weapons being dropped along the 38th parallel, we had POWs who admitted this and signed statements to the effect that this occurred. This was why we had to deprogram them, quote unquote, and say that they were, quote unquote, brainwashed. All right. So that's where we are. And one guy who knew about this program was Frank Olson. That's what Frank Olson knew. Frank Olson knew that we used biological weapons in the Korean War along the 38th parallel as we were leaving. And Olson was not happy about that. This haunted Frank Olson. And after Frank Olson was dosed by Gottlieb, he began to blabber. And his blabbering scared them. So they picked him up and they took him around New York until he was taken eventually to see Harold Abramson, who was one of the CIA doctors, technically an allergist doctor, but nevertheless, one of their guys. So Frank Olson is now blabbering, and they're worried about him. They take him to the Hotel Pennsylvania, which you'll show that picture of it, I presume. And he is brought up to the floor and either is pushed out the window or runs and dives out the window and kills himself.
Yeah, and from my understanding, the window is not exactly easy to open, so he might have had a little.
Right. In fact, there's a conversation that was recorded and released between whoever was in the room and Abramson, the doctor, who he had seen the day before. And the conversation said, he's gone and there's nothing we can do about it. And Abramson replies on the phone tap, well, he's gone. That's the end of him. There's nothing we can do. He acknowledges the fact that all they say is he's gone, which is kind of weird. It's like one line of each of them on the phone tap, and that was it. From the hotel room, by the way. The call came from the hotel room. So whoever was up there called up Harold Abramson, the doctor, and told him that he was gone, quote unquote, gone. It's a little ominous. Now, Sarunum is the code word. This is a very rare piece of information that has nothing to do with Kinzer that I've discovered. Sarunum was the code word that Gottlieb used for LSD. And Gottlieb was obsessed with LSD. And I'm embarrassed to say that Gottlieb took more acid trips than I did. Okay. I'm really, really.
You took less than 200?
He took over I didn't come anywhere near that, but he took over 200 acid trips, according to everybody, which sounds incredibly insane that he would do this, but apparently he did. And apparently to no effect. But as you pointed out, he lives in a slave cabin in the woods in Maryland that he converted, and he's got goats that he milks at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they only drink goat milk, him and his wife.
No running water. He had to
no running water. This is how the cat lives. This is, he's a perfect candidate for LSD because he's living like Wavy Gravy from Max Yasgur's farm or something, So he is a strange guy. Now, here's something that's really weird. I don't even know what it means, but here's something that's really weird. He had a club foot, right? He also had a speech impediment where he stuttered. Okay. So what does he do for the club foot? He begins to major in folk dancing. Everywhere he goes in the world, he learns the native folk dance of that country. And this is to overcome his club foot. Now, what does he do with the speech impediment? He goes to San Jose State University and gets a degree in speech therapy just to deal with his own speech impediment. And you say, well, what's so weird about that? 1952, the guy who hires him has a club foot and a speech impediment, and his name was Alan Dulles.
Interesting. I did not know that.
There's Dulles, and he had a club foot, just like Gottlieb, and a speech impediment like Gottlieb. I think that's bizarre, but that's just me.
Coincidence?
Coincidence or crazy? You decide. So anyway, getting back to Ira Baldwin at the University of Wisconsin. Baldwin recommends Gottlieb, and that's how he gets into the Dulles world, because Ira Baldwin created a thing. I don't even know how to explain this. I wish there was no pictures of it. He creates a 4-story this is insane. He creates a 4-story high, 130-ton bathysphere, right? A bathysphere, a giant ball called the 8-ball. And inside the 8-ball, you can put a guy, and through the sides, it had portals where you can spray in all kinds of toxins and secret gases and everything on the guy who's inside the 8-ball. And he would be inside this giant ball, like a bathysphere, bro. And then they'd spray in the toxins. Now, how did they learn to spray in the toxins? Kurt Blome, his job as a Nazi scientist was about spraying toxins. That was his area of expertise. So you see the direct connection between the Nazis and Ira Baldwin developing this giant 8-ball, they called it, in this warehouse where they tested these toxins on everyone who was in there to see how long they would live or what what would happen to them inside, depending on the drug they were using. So before they got to LSD, they tried every drug known to man. They did alcohol, they did cocaine, they did, benzos, they did every single drug to no avail. What they were looking for was the truth serum. And what they laid out was the idea, and this is their fantasy, was to get a guy and make him go into a safe, open a safe, bring out secret documents and give it to them. Let's say there was an ambassador from Japan or an ambassador from Bulgaria or whatever, that they would give him this drug, this uninvented mystery drug, and he, through mind control, would do their bidding. That's what they wanted. Now, you can mock it up or laugh about it, whatever, but this was the fantasy that the CIA had for 10 years. And many people think it's doable. Many people believe it's doable. Many people have shown it's doable. They could not let go of this. He hires Jolly West. He is the guy who directly, as we showed in the episode, if you want to go back and look at the Jolly West episode. But they also hired George Estabrooks. George Estabrooks was a professional hypnotist, and he had written an article in Argosy saying that he could hypnotize a man to do spy work. And in that article, he talks about how he could hypnotize people to do stuff against their morality. Well, this sets off all kinds of bells and whistles at the CIA, Eric. And they bring in and hire George Estabrooks as a consultant for the CIA to teach them all hypnosis and hypnotist trickery. And he actually makes a book for them called CIA Trickery on how to do stuff. This is not to be confused with the magician, John Mulholland, who teaches the CIA how to do sleight of hand magic, because what Gottlieb was able to do was develop all kinds of poisons and toxins and delivery agents. What he needed was someone to teach the agents how to deliver these toxins and agents surreptitiously. And that's where John Mulholland comes in. The John Mulholland, who deserves his own episode, was the mentor. He was the #1 magician in the country. Okay. He would go to Radio City Music Hall and sell it out in an hour. You say, who is John Mulholland? Never heard of him. He was the mentor to a guy who passed away named Harry Houdini.
Whoa. All right. And we're going to be doing Harry Houdini, so I guess Mulholland's coming up.
Yeah, Mulholland's going to come up. And he's really an obscure cat. And I never even heard of the guy. But he's the guy who taught Houdini stuff. So Gottlieb hires both, Dulles indirectly, but Gottlieb directly hires both Estabrooks and Mulholland to start teaching this stuff. And look, he's involved in so much stuff. He gets involved with the warden at Lexington, Kentucky Federal Prison. You say, well, what's going on down there in the federal prison? Well, this guy who is not the warden, the warden doctor, put it that way, the doctor who's in charge of the medical program. Now, Lexington, Kentucky is not a normal federal pen. It has a heroin addiction program. It has a drug program. It has a detox program, and it has a secret experimental CIA drug program. And that's where the medical doctor becomes the head guy of the medical program there. I forget his name, Ibis, I think his name was. He becomes the direct conduit to Sidney Gottlieb. So what is Sidney Gottlieb doing? He wants to test LSD on the prisoners. So this guy says, I don't care. That's great. He says, give me some money. I'll get on it. He takes seven guys, and I'll explain the system. He takes 7 guys and he gives them acid for like 4 times the dosage daily, 72 consecutive days on acid, mostly black guys. And why are they doing this? Because Lexington gives you free heroin. Lexington, Kentucky federal program gives the inmates free heroin. And you can indicate you want it injected in your arm, smoking it, snorting it, any way you want at Lexington. And this is separate from the program. And you say, well, how do you know this? How do you know about this program? Well, I'll tell you what. Red Rodney was the trumpet player who became a famous junkie who turned Charlie Parker onto heroin, the famous alto saxophone player, Charlie Bird Parker. So Red Rodney gets arrested. Red Rodney gets caught in Amsterdam by DEA agents. He's strapped to a board, handcuffed to a board under orders by Nixon, and brought back on a C-130 transport that's separate from this story. And he ends up in Lexington, Kentucky in the federal pen. So what does Red Rodney do? He's a trumpet player. He's the best, one of the great bebop trumpet players in the history of the world. And he hooks up with another guy and they form a band in the prison. And that guy was a friend of mine named Wayne Kramer, who was in a bunch of my bands. Wayne Kramer, the founder of the MC5 out of Detroit. So a lot of this stuff comes to me from Wayne, who's a recovered heroin addict, but he's in the prison of Lexington doing heroin with Red Rodney, and they form a band in the prison, and they actually get a manager who manages the band in the prison, and they go outside the prison to play different, Kiwanis events and other crap, and while on heroin. So a lot of this stuff I've learned from people inside, not just Wayne, but others who've been to Lexington. However, that being said, the black inmates who were doing this program don't know they're taking LSD. They just want the heroin, which is given to them as a reward if they sign the document to take the LSD, which they all do because they don't know what the hell they're taking. So all of them just flip out, and you just go, well, it might affect them later on. What if they become crazy and commit crazy crimes? Well, there was a guy they did it to named Whitey Bulger. And Whitey Bulger, shown here in this depiction by Hunley, took unbelievable amounts of acid unbeknownst to him, and came out as a crazy psycho killer. And that's part of the legacy that we have to live with of the spill off. This is just what we know about the spillover of things that happen because of this insane program. There's another shot of Whitey Bulger, played by
in there for Mark.
What's that?
In there for you, Mark. Whitey much later in life.
Right. Well, that's in Santa Monica, right here,
yeah,
in LA, where he lived in a rent-controlled apartment, which I wish was still available because it was a block from the beach. He lived with his girlfriend, who told her hairdresser in some moment of weakness that she was living with Whitey Bulger, and the money was all in the walls of the apartment on Santa Monica, I think on 6th Street or 9th Street, and nearby the beach. But anyway, so Whitey Bulger took so much acid while in Lexington that he may or may not have gone insane. One of the jurors in his case found out about it and began writing him letters saying if she would have known about this, she would have voted for acquittal in the Whitey Bulger case. He was eventually killed by hired guys, they believe, in when he was transferred out of Lexington. But the juror actually started writing him saying she had no idea about this program that Bulger was a victim of. It's kind of interesting.
There's another guy too. This one.
Who is this one?
That's a young shot. He's more famously seen as this guy.
Okay.
Ted Kaczynski. Unabomber.
Be good for another episode, but right now.
No, I'm just saying he was also in the program. So.
Oh yeah. No, okay. Well, the reality of it is that the people, Sidney Gottlieb was so afraid of being caught. He knew that this was immoral. He knew this was illegal. He knew that this was the Nazification of the CIA. That even within the CIA and in books, he went by the name Sherman R. Griffith. Sherman R. Griffith was his nom de plume code name, even in the CIA. So he knew what he was doing was wrong. He had a company, a phony front company called Chemrafil Associates, and that was what he used, a letterhead. He created a front company called Chemrafil when he was writing to Dr. Jolly West when West was in Oklahoma, killing Tusco the elephant with 2,800 micrograms of acid. Poor Tusco had to suffer just like Whitey Bulger. So anyway, getting back to Wormwood, the recommended miniseries of the week, there's a character of Sidney Gottlieb in the movie played by Tim Blake Nelson, who you saw in Brother Where Art Thou, and he always kind of plays a hillbilly type, Tim Blake Nelson. I thought to myself, there he is. I thought to myself, what a weird cultural appropriation of this hillbilly playing a Jewish guy from the Bronx. And I did a little research, and it turns out Tim Blake Nelson is Jewish, out of Oklahoma. Who knew? Who knew? So no cultural appropriation here, and a fantastic job. I think he's out of Tulsa, actually, Tim Blake Nelson, but he plays Sidney Gottlieb in Wormwood, and in that series, which I recommend, it's still on Netflix, by the way. You will see what they did to Frank Olson. And it's not that they particularly targeted Frank Olson. They target Frank Olson after he has a bad trip. There were other CIA guys who had bad trips. One guy ran across the bridge, the Potomac Bridge, was hiding underneath the abutment of the bridge for every car that came by. He was losing his mind. They had to drag him back in naked. I mean, they did this to all of them, took acid. It's the craziest thing because they wanted, and part of it was in case you were caught and dosed, you would know what it feels like, which is what they did every drug for. I mean, even Oswald in Atsugi, Japan, at the U-2 spy base took acid under the auspices of the military. Oswald had to take acid. Everybody in the CIA, O&I, was given LSD because they believed this was the truth serum that we were developing to get the truth out of spies. So they wanted our spies to be hip to it and how it felt in case you were dosed.
Yeah, well, what was it? There's some speculation about, the creativity with Gottlieb and everybody else there, like, I wonder if he was taking acid while he came up with this stuff.
Yeah, somebody brought that up about it, and I don't know. I mean, look, he took 200 acid trips and had to cover over some period of time. I mean,
I
he
know,
took
well, yeah, let
200.
me see, over 10 years, he
Right.
ran a program, and I'm
Look,
like, "What is that?" Oh, well, it's not weekly, but it's
dude, that's
frequent.
insane. I mean, I may have done acid like 30 to 50. I don't even think I did it 50 times. I probably did it 25, 30 times in my life. And that's over again, a long period of time. I mean, um, that's insane amount of that's Leary level acid. I mean, wavy gravy level of acid taking. That's put you in the all-star team. I'll put it that way. And who is that? I can't see. It's a little small.
Tim Leary.
Oh, that's Leary. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Leary's at Harvard while these guys are doing the same thing. So what happens is Gottlieb he goes to Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland, and he's worried about the Soviets getting acid. So he gets money from the CIA and buys all the acid in the world from Sandoz Laboratories and has it brought to Fort Detrick. All the acid. There's no more acid left. He buys
Yeah, it
every
was like
single.
$217,000 or something to do it.
I forget the actual number in American dollars, but it was tons of acid, right? And he brings it to the U.S. so the Soviets won't get their hands on it. But when he comes into the CIA, I think it was like Friday the 13th in
Yep,
what
1951. I don't know the month.
1951, right? It was July 13th, 1951. He gets
Yeah.
hired by the CIA. Operation Bluebird is already underway, and Operation Bluebird is also known as Operation Chatter, to get people to talk under the influence of various drugs and
Mm.
electroshock therapy, torture, waterboarding, whatever the hell you want to come up with. I mean, all of this stuff, as Kinzer points out, goes all through to this day through the CIA and the intelligence. The stuff that we learned from the Nazis um, goes all the way through to waterboarding in a place that Eric used to live called Guantanamo. And he smiles nicely, remembering fondly the great meals and the views at
There's a place
Guantanamo
for
Bay.
you there, Mark.
What's that?
There's a place for you there.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. Anyway, so um, the Bluebird becomes Operation Artichoke, and I was go they say why Artichoke? There was a obscure gangster in New York called the Artichoke King, who was a vicious murderer. And it's believed that Gottlieb named the program after the Artichoke King in
Hmm.
New York. And Artichoke begins to morph into a program which is more famous, called MKUltra. And MKUltra eventually becomes the program that most people know it by today. Um, because it gets the most funding, it spreads out to the most universities, it has the most front corporations, it does the most damage, and MK Ultra really. There's also MK Delta under there, MK Nomi. There's a bunch of sub projects under MK Ultra, but the MK Ultra thing covers the Lexington, Kentucky program
It
and a
was an
bunch.
umbrella program?
Yeah, it's an umbrella program.
Midnight
There's a lot of.
Climax was under it and all the other stuff?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
By the way, that hotel was the Statler back in the day, the one you showed.
The
In
Pennsylvania
New
end?
York. It was the Statler. I think it later became the Penta or the Hotel Pennsylvania. I'm not sure, but it was originally the Statler. And the dialogue was, "Well, he's gone," and Abramson says, "Well, that's too bad." That's the phone conversation that was taped. And I'll tell you this: the guys who show up are the security team to deal with the situation. The security team for the CIA shows up, and there's NYPD in the room saying, "What the hell happened here? We're NYPD. These are the detectives." And these guys show up and they go, "CIA security team." And they go, "Okay, thank you." And they take over the crime scene. The CIA security team is one that mops up, let's say, right? Dead bodies, whatever. Not that they took his body away, but they investigate and mop up the situation. This guy, whoever was in that room, called the security team. So who shows up in the security team in that room? A guy named James McCord, who was arrested as a Watergate burglar, bugging the DNC headquarters years later with the Watergate plumbers. James McCord, there he is, shows up as the security chief for the CIA. You can't make this up on me.
He was somewhere else too, right? Or no, okay.
No,
I know
I
the
mean,
Watergate.
James McCord is working under Hunt and Liddy, but McCord is the one who's in the Watergate complex, and he's arrested years later. Ironically, the same guy who's in the hotel when Olson either jumps or throws himself out the window. Now, there was a guy named Anderson Cooper whose brother during Thanksgiving also ran and jumped out the window of their apartment on Fifth Avenue when the guy's mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, who
Vanderbilt.
made what's that?
I was gonna say Vanderbilt, yeah.
Yeah. Gloria Vanderbilt. Something. Some people say, well, he was just depressed. He didn't really jump out the window. He fell out the window. I remember reading the original description that he got up, and this I could be wrong, but this is the way I remember the original description of Anderson Cooper's brother. He got up from the Thanksgiving dinner table unannounced and bolted for the open window and dove head first out onto Fifth Avenue. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that was what the original report said. And if that's the case, it may be similar to what happened to Frank Olson.
Yeah, and, shocking, what do they fall into? Blue blood, old line family. I mean, we're talking about the Vanderbilts who go all the way back
Yeah.
to
Oh,
the
yeah.
1800s and trains, and I mean, it's a yeah,
Well, don't forget Anderson Cooper also interned
at
at
CIA.
CIA by his own admission, and
Mm,
then drifted around the world as a journalist afterwards, filing reports for newspapers that didn't exist. So, look, I mean, there's a reason he's the last man standing at CNN. Everybody else seems to be an untouchable, Hunley. Like nobody. Well, Anderson Cooper, what did he do? You know what I mean? Everybody else has been fired except for one guy, and he may know where all the bodies are buried. But yeah, I mean, getting back to Frank Olson, they will exhume his body later. The family will sue the United States government. The United States government admits that he was dosed with LSD. They admit it. Um, whether it's Helms or Gottlieb or one of the two admits that we had this program. Gerald Ford brings the family into the Oval Office of the White House. There's a photo. I don't know. It's in Kinzer's book. There's a photo that's been released. I don't know if you have it in your collection, but there's a photo of Gerald Ford in the Oval Office with some other guys that are later to become famous for invading another country under another president. But they are Ford's brain trust that's in there, and this in there with the family of Olson apologizing for ostensibly killing, which is it's never been done before in the United States history. It's never been done before.
and we settled too, I think. They got some
Yeah. Oh
sort of
yeah. No, they
financial
settled.
yeah.
Right. I think part of the settlement might have been the apology by the president. I think that because they just didn't show up. I think it was part of the
Which is good. I mean, I'm glad that they did get an apology of some kind, but
there was a guy named George White. Now, George White was an ex-cop, ex-DEA, or currently DEA. Wasn't even ex-DEA. Is that Frank White? George White?
George White, yeah.
George Hunter White. Yeah. George Hunter White was DEA, it might have been NYC intelligence police. He gets an apartment at 81 Bedford Street, down in the West Village. 81 Bedford Street. It's a weird little street. I used to live at 1 Christopher around the corner from it. Bedford, kind of a spooky street. I always got the vibe that there was like some sort, either an embassy in there or some sort of strange people walk around Bedford Street. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, so they got 2 apartments on 81 Bedford, the building. And Operation Midnight Climax begins in New York. It'll later go to San Francisco, but and you'll later see it in Tom O'Neill's book, and also operating at a Haight-Ashbury clinic or whatever. But it starts on 81 Bedford, and in 81 Bedford they have a two-way mirror in the wall. They set up a bar. He's on the other side filming this guy White,
on
and
the
they bring
toilet.
yeah, he's got a toilet in there too. He's got a full bar, a toilet, and apparently his wife and him, separately to this program, were swingers involved in all kinds of S&M stuff, having nothing to do with this. But apparently, this is on his resume. So I maybe he was Gottlieb found the right guy. So they start filming people that they bring in on to dose with acid and put them into sexual compromised positions, not for blackmail or anything, but to see how they react and to film it, to show it to Gottlieb and Alan Dulles and others up the food chain of intelligence.
Amazing.
So White gets involved with the version of that in San Francisco, which may or may not have eventually involved Manson, according to Tom O'Neill.
By the way, somebody pointed out in the chat, and I think they have a point. Another reason for Kinzer to have the book out is because of chaos and Tom O'Neill.
Yeah, right.
Which,
that's absolutely probably true. I agree. It might be the counterpoint to chaos. There's a book out now that you sent me from the guy who's debunking Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
Lipkin or somebody, or
oh god, I forgot the guy's name, but it's self-promotion. It's funny because I look, I was like, who submit? Oh, he submitted himself.
Right. It says Oliver Stone,
Flim Flam Film.
Flim Flam Film. Yeah, it's a good name for a book. But these things are paid for by the deep state, Eric. These books are very effective. They're very effective. I mean, the place where that happened in Weston, Maryland, was a resort called, not resort, but it used to be a Boy Scout camp called Deep Creek Lake. And in there was a cabin, not unlike the cabin I'm going to this week. So anything could happen in this cabin that I'm going to in the mountains. So if you don't see me on Friday, start looking for that cabin in the mountains that I'm going to tomorrow morning. That's where he's dosed with the Contro. And within 1 week of that incident, in the cabin, Frank Olson is dead. Just to give you a time frame of how fast he was dead after that event.
Amazing.
But, yeah, getting back to White. White becomes the muscle. The reason that he likes him so much, Gottlieb, is he's a rough ex-cop and a DEA guy, so he has the DEA badge and the cover of another organization, which is what they like to do, is get guys who had legitimate. Oh, look at this guy; he's terrifying. I think he weighed like 300 pounds. He was a beast. This guy's a total beast.
I wouldn't wrestle him.
His wife was apparently a dominatrix on top of it. There's no picture of his wife. Look at this guy. This is a guy sitting in the other room watching you through a two-way mirror, But yeah, so anyway, so Frank Olson, the one thing he started blabbing about that he was unhappy about
Fred Litwin.
was, what's that?
Fred Litwin.
Oh, the guy. Yeah, I don't want to give him any air.
Okay.
The thing that Frank Olson was really upset about, according to sources, was the biowarfare and bioweapons used against North Korea at the end of the war. And they have to shut this up. They had to shut this down. This was a bridge too far. But this is what we learned from Kurt Blome and from Dr. Ishii out of Tokyo. These are the things that end up in Fort Detrick. These are the things that we used in apparently in Korea, according to sources, including a pilot who later talked about dropping some sort of bacteriological warfare bombs along the 38th parallel, which becomes a DMZ.
It's disturbing as hell, because they've even talked about, it's like, we've got to get these guys in here because we have these scruples, and they didn't. So it was like Blome would lecture and talk about sarin gas and state, Yeah, age didn't seem to matter. Everybody's dead in 2 minutes. It's like, how would you know that?
Right,
So
right,
disturbing
right.
stuff.
Yeah, why would you know the age delineation of the victims? I mean,
Mm.
it's interesting because what you begin to learn is any cause that you can find to be just, any particular warlike cause, whether it's the Nazis versus the Soviets, whether it's us versus the Russian, whatever it is, the doctors just give up every single moral thing in their playbook. The Nazi doctors, the American doctors, this whole doctor bullshit, Hippocratic oath, goes out the freaking window in a millisecond. As long as you can morally justify the reasons for getting these doctors to come on board, they come on board in a second. They throw every single piece of training out the window. You know what I mean? Now, it may not be all of them, it may not be every doctor, but there's certainly enough of them, like Gottlieb and others, who are willing to jettison all their morality for a cause. And you can make any cause work. The Nazis made their cause work. The Soviets did the same thing. They made their cause work. At some point, you got to say, I don't care what the cause is. I'm not giving up my Hippocratic on my moral oath. They said under one of the things they kept saying was that you can't be hypnotized into violating anything that you morally didn't believe in. And that
Bullshit.
crock of shit, what's that?
Bullshit.
Right, that went out the window. But this is what Kinza is, and others, the Jolly West and the others, were suggesting with Sirhan and with some of these hypnotics, brainwashing things, and that and almost like they protest too much, Eric.
Oh, yeah. And it makes a lot of sense that they go on tour saying it. Yep, 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 yep. And it's like, no, maybe the program stopped because it worked. They
Yeah,
had what they need. They don't need to
yeah,
keep testing something that they've got done.
right. And no, absolutely. I mean, they
Darren
were
Brown has proven this multiple
right.
times, by the way. He has literally
Yes, yes,
duplicated
yes,
Sirhan,
yes.
um, at least twice.
Right. I've seen the footage. I mean, it's breathtaking footage, that he shows you how easy it is to do it. The idea that the morality is going to block you, well, under hypnosis, you just change the morality.
Right, exactly. It's a different it's like, somebody is not going to feel comfortable getting naked in front of a room most of the time, right? But if they think they're getting in the shower, it's perfectly normal.
Well, Frank McGee, Dr. Brian is who we're talking about, by the way, um, who may or may not have hypnotized Sirhan. I happen to believe it was Brian, William Bryan, the who was the forerunner to Jolly West. I had this discussion with Tom O'Neill, and he disagreed with me, and that was the end of our conversation. It was rather abrupt. You know, it was weird. I mean, it was really weird. Like, he didn't want to hear it. And I said, dude, there's no connection between that I've ever seen between West and Sirhan, but he's going to try to prove it in the book. So I'll keep an open mind. Um, but William Bryan, who also deprogrammed the Korean POWs, gets involved in as a consultant to a movie called The Manchurian Candidate. So Hollywood is intermeshed with these situations with the CIA, and books and everything else. They're all intertwined, and you don't know what's right and what's wrong, or what's left or what's right, or anything else, because they're so intertwined. I mean, Brian, admits that he had the power to hypnotize anyone to do anything, but under oath, he would say, no, I don't have that power. That's what Jolly West did. Same thing with Jolly West. He was brought in on these mind control cases, famously the Patty Hearst case, where he says she wasn't brainwashed at all. She fell in love with Sinkyu, and got a machine gun, started robbing banks. Everybody does it,
As one does.
as one does.
Young, in love, part of a Tarantino script, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, so you got Brian doing it, you got Jolly West doing it. There's a reason people are involved in this thing of brainwashing. And I believe that the program has advanced so far as to today, where we see, TDS and other situations coming out of the past COVID years, the past couple of years, we're seeing a lot of weird mental aberrational behavior that looks a lot like an MK Ultra program to me as an outsider looking at it anecdotally. They may have mastered certain aspects of this program, and we don't know what the trigger is, but it goes back to me always the banning of subliminal advertising on TV.
Mm.
Why did they ban subliminal advertising? Well, it doesn't work. Really? You got to ban it because it doesn't work? That's that's unusual.
Well,
Let's
that's
say it
like the
does work.
Pompeo interview, dude. When he was
Right.
talking about, he's like, those JFK documents, they need to stay hidden, but there's nothing to see there.
Right. They're meaningless documents, but God forbid they're ever released. Could be trouble.
Yeah.
So anyway, to sum it up, I believe there isn't a current modern day version of MK Ultra 2, The Reckoning, where MK Ultra, whatever the modern formation of MK Ultra is, and it may be triggered by somewhere through cable television and through media, which is why they banned subliminal advertising. And I believe this subliminal stuff works. And I believe there's subliminal messages being utilized in many of these cable news shows. That's just my theory. I have nothing to back it up with, just a theory. But I believe subliminal messaging works. And why give it up?
Product placement is subliminal messaging, if you
Of
think about it.
course. Of course.
It's just it's influence,
Right.
and normal marketing is doing it in
Right.
a
But
lot of
they
ways.
had, they
Oh,
had
they're
lightning.
weaponized.
Right. But they had lightning fast subliminal messages that were
Sure.
being used in commercials, Eric. There was a little bit more nefarious than what you
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they banned from supposedly banned from commercials on TV, commercials. Now,
Mhm.
I did an article years ago for a publication called High Times, oddly enough, and it was about subliminal anti-drug messaging in Hollywood television shows, where a unusual guy who was a drug czar named Barry McCaffrey was paying money to Hollywood producers to put in subliminal messaging and messaging in the scripts that was anti-drug. Just so you know, you could look it up. I think I put the article on Locals. If not, I'll put up the Locals article
Please
from
do. Yeah.
yeah, it was a cover story for High Times that I was hired to do an investigation, and it bore out that they admitted doing it. They admit under Barry McCaffrey, they admitted paying Hollywood reporters millions of dollars to put in anti-drug messaging subliminally into TV shows.
And he was a drug dealer.
He was the drug czar, Barry McCaffrey.
Oh, czar. Okay, wait, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
remember he was the drug czar at some. I don't
That's
know if
right.
we have a drug czar now. Do we have a drug czar?
I don't know. I don't know
I don't know if
anymore.
we do or we don't. But there was a point where General Barry McCaffrey, was
Yeah.
he a 4-star, Eric?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he's like the Surgeon General type
No, no, no,
or
no,
is
no,
it
no.
a military
Dude, he
general or
was in
not.
the Iraq War. No, no,
Okay.
Barry McCaffrey, I think is a 4-star general,
Okay.
and people in the chat probably know better than I do.
Yeah, fair enough. And the chat's going off about he probably ran the drugs. It's like, well, yeah, if he worked with Ollie North, he could have.
I think he was on the other side politically at Ollie North.
Hmm.
Yeah, McCaffrey, I think, was an Obama appointee or something.
Yeah, that's a good question about the drug czar. I haven't thought about drug czars since Reagan, really. And
Right. I don't know if there is a drug czar anymore. That's a good question. And if there is, what's he doing?
uh, selling.
Anyway, so when they
Oh
start to
no,
have,
Biden has one.
yeah, they start to have these hearings, these church committee hearings, and that's where Richard Helms has to run himself on his sword and resign. Colby takes over. When Helms is gone, that's where Gottlieb realizes his days are numbered because Helms was his buffer. Helms was the guy who covered his ass. So is that the two of them, or that's
Yep.
Helms and Nixon?
Yeah, Helms and Nixon. Yeah.
Yeah. So Helms knows where all the family jewels are, knows where all the bodies are buried, knows about MK Ultra. He will literally, Gottlieb, go out to a warehouse outside of Maryland to personally oversee the destruction of the MK Ultra documents in January of 1973. And he will then be brought in to testify under oath on the church committee hearings, says he has a heart condition, is brought into an side room to avoid the bright lights of the. Yeah, there he is. I think that's him waiting to go in to the ante room to be grilled by the senators who didn't know enough about the program because the documents were destroyed. Inoue, who is remember Inoue? He was the one-armed senator from Hawaii.
Oh,
He had lost his arm in World War II, I believe, and also Kennedy was there, Ted Kennedy. They did not have enough documentation to intelligently grill Gottlieb. So Gottlieb somehow gets immunity and tells them a few different things. And everything we know comes from him after he's granted immunity, Gottlieb. And he is supposedly gone after by the Justice Department a couple of years later, and it's quietly dropped. It's in the Washington Post that Gottlieb is being investigated for possible indictment, and that disappears. That disappears because nobody wants to open up that Pandora's box anymore. Nobody.
now wasn't it John Marks who actually brought this to their attention through the Freedom of Information Act that
Yep.
he
Yep.
found the expense reports. So
Yeah.
it fucked. They screwed it up because they burned all the stuff they thought, but then there was like a separate track of their expenses that kind of was they were able to piece together what was going on through that.
Yeah, the only thing left was the expenses, and that was through Marks finding those documents through the Freedom of Information Act. Absolutely true. Marks, not Kinzer, keep in mind. Whatever Kinzer claims to have done is zero compared to what Marks has done as a researcher. And Marks is the man. And he finds the expense reports and he finds how much money the purchase of the LSD, those numbers, buying the LSD from Sandoz, those documents materialize because of Marks. And that's what ends up being in the church committee hearings. And not to mention the fact that, not to mention that he puts poison in the toothpaste to kill Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, and personally, Gottlieb, that is, will go over to the Congo, and his Patrice Lumumba, he will later be killed physically, not with the poison toothpaste. I had the same hat for many years when I was growing up, one of the great hats of all time. So Lumumba, shown here in an earlier time, is killed in a coup d'etat, but the original coup details were designed by Sidney Gottlieb, and it was going to be this point.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I actually had the footage of.
well, it's not really relevant right now because
Cool.
that's not really relevant what we're saying. But he is killed in a coup. But the reality of it is the way they designed the coup was to put poison into toothpaste. And Gottlieb flew over personally to the Congo to deliver the toothpaste in the tube to the CIA station chief in Congo. So he also designed the conch shell that was supposed to blow up when Fidel Castro was skin diving. He also designed the exploding cigars. He also designed there's Castro looking for the conch shell that would blow up if he picked up that particular conch shell. I mean,
And the
Gottlieb
skin suit. He did a diving
right,
suit of Castro
right. They
too.
sent him a diving suit that had bacteria on the inside that would give him incredible skin rashes if he put it on. I mean, and then the disappearing beard stuff, which they had tried on Hitler in 1930 and 40 to eradicate Hitler's mustache. I mean, these were just crazy things. And then the idea, of course, perennially that never goes away, that he would be dosed on acid and then give a speech rambling nonstop for hours, making a fool out of him. That whole thing is always so crazy. They never take into account that the guy might not give the speech if he was high as a kite. You know, they never go, well, maybe he'll stop and not give the speech. Nah, he'll talk for 8 hours under the influence of acid. That makes more sense. Anyway, so he comes up with 9,000 devices to kill Castro. And none of them work. None of them work. I mean, whether they're ineffective, whether Castro has better security, whatever they are, he is involved. He comes up with the silver dollar that has the toxin with the pin that is on board the U-2 spy plane with Gary Francis Powers, that Powers refuses to kill himself with, by the way. Just a little side note. Silver dollar that screws off and a pin goes in and there's a toxin in there. You stab yourself and you're dead in 1 second. Powers famously refused to commit suicide, was then put on a show trial by Khrushchev, which led to the peace treaty deal meeting to be canceled between Eisenhower and Khrushchev because of the shooting down of the U-2 spy plane. Anyway, he didn't kill himself, and that toxin, that device, Gottlieb moves up the ladder in the CIA, where he becomes like Q in James Bond later in his career. He becomes the technical services head and comes up with these devices. Here he is thinking. Is that him thinking about it, or
that's
is that
Q? That's Q.
that's Q playing the British MI6 version of Sidney Gottlieb in probably Thunderball or something.
And
anyway, he came up with a syringe that was so thin. Oh wow! Look at that. There's the famous spy gun. He was showing it to Richard Helms at the time. It's Frank Church, senator from Idaho, and I forget the guy's name on the right. Another famous senator. Anyway, Helms would famously say, "Well, if you want to go that way and talk about this stuff," I'm paraphrasing Helms. Helms was like so sarcastic, it was ridiculous. And he goes, "Why would you use this spy gun?" And Helms goes, "Well, if you want to go like this, really, what difference does it make what kind of gun we use to kill these guys?" And there was a certain truth to what Helms was saying. It was a show trial of a type of hearing that they already knew the answer.
Bye, Mark. I hope it's not Mark's battery.
No, it was somebody calling me on the telephone, which is
serving as
the camera at the same time. I don't know why that didn't happen earlier. I didn't even think about that, Hunley.
Do not disturb next time.
I don't know. I never did this before. I don't know. I'm a novice, man. I'm in the research division.
It was the CIA.
I'm in research. You're in tech. But so far, so good. We're pulling this off, right? Is this?
Oh, yeah. Talk fast before you get a call.
They're going to keep calling back. Anyway, so the church committee show trial, which was extremely effective for a number of years. I mean, it pushed the CIA backwards on the defensive for a number of years. Their limited hangout was the gang that couldn't shoot straight. And they were just bozos doing this. Is that Jimmy with who?
Church.
Oh, Frank Church. Okay. Sorry. It's very small on my phone. Sorry. Frank Church will, oddly enough, quickly die of cancer. You can't make this up, oddly. Totally healthy man. He'll be dead within a few years. But he gave his life to a good cause. And we need now, in discussion, what's going on is a Massey-led church committee. Massey out of Georgia. Where is it?
I don't remember who it was, but I know that was part of McCarthy's deal to get him as speaker. Right. It had to be another church committee.
Right. Okay. So we may be seeing this again, which is sorely, sorely needed at this point. That it's completely out of control, which is the way they were then. I mean, it wasn't for the church committee. Who knows what would happen? I mean, they were killing world leaders. They were overthrowing governments. They were doing all kinds of stuff, which at the time would be the equivalent of what they've been doing today. Even though now it's much more domestic, what they were doing was much more international back then. But they've clearly turned in.
Except for the president, maybe.
What?
Well, that was sort of domestic, even though they were doing.
Yeah.
Just, a couple of minor things there.
Well, but the reasons were international. They might have been. They weren't killing him over, going off the gold standard, as people might suggest, or the allowance for oil depletion allowance. I don't think those were the reasons.
Yeah. No, the church committee was effective, and it also helped not only the CIA but FBI. Kind of was cleaned up a bit. And there was a little window there. Of feigned incompetence to real incompetence to then they started to get the power back.
Right, and which is where we are right now, which is why I wanted to do this episode because, I'm taking acid right now. No, only kidding. The episode needed to be done because there's a lot of similarities and echoes of the early '70s, today, and I thought that this would be effective in terms of what we've been going through in the past couple of years here.
Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah, almost exactly, right, and, look, I don't know if they're killing presidents or what they're
Oh,
doing.
actually, it is 50 years. He burned the files in '73.
Okay, alright,
Yeah,
there we
yeah, I think it's like that is kinda crazy.
right, I mean, he begins to form just to get back to Gottlieb, he was a Marxist when he started. He was a socialist, not unlike John Brennan, and not unlike a
Charlie
lot.
West.
Right, I mean, he's an avowed socialist when he gets started, and at the end, when he retires from the CIA, what does he do? He forms a communal society of various couples, not unlike him and his wife, to live communally in a
Mhm.
commune environment. Commune is the beginning of the word communist. So he's got goats and he's living in the woods or whatever he's doing.
Or a leper colony or
Yeah, the leper colony was this, yeah.
the
He
guy
wants
is
to
an
sail on
oddball.
a he wants to go on a freighter around the world and work with lepers, because that's what I wanted to do growing up.
Well, somebody pointed out, though, they were like, "Well, you know what? Lepers would be people that nobody would think about if things, were tested."
Well, the CIA does that all the time. Remember, I told you that's why they use National Geographic magazine in the '50s and '60s to go around the world to photograph pygmies and investigate bush people in British, Guiana. The cover, which later became Vice magazine and Vice TV, originally was National Geographic, through their photographers and their crew.
Crazy, crazy. Oh, somebody just pointed out too that, I did not realize that, Watergate was '73 too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're 50 years, like, into a lotta
Yeah, it's 2
interest.
generations. They like to go 2 generations deep to make sure there's nobody around, and, these kids today who are 20, 25 in that age group, they don't know anything about this. They don't know shit from Shinola regarding, 50 years ago, let alone 50 months ago. So, um, you can manipulate the populace because the people from 50 years ago are now, much older or dead, you know?
Well, yeah, because, I mean, adult at the time is 70.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 which is fine. And it's kind of funny because I remember when my dad retired, just to digress a bit, and he started to watch C-SPAN and some other shows, and I used to hear him muttering in the living room because he didn't have time to deal with this when he was working. Now that he was retired, post 65, he
Mm.
began to learn all of these nefarious things, and he got very angry that he had learned all this stuff and was busy working his whole life and being in World War II and the Navy, whatever most regular people were doing. He was infuriated at the end of his life from 65 to 80, that period of 15 years, because he would sit there watching C-SPAN and doing, learning about stuff that he didn't know about, Eric.
Well, we
But
we
he couldn't
actually
do anything about it.
we're getting some of that in the comments too.
What?
People who are watching the show, and they're getting annoyed and seeing
Yeah, yeah,
what the
well,
hell's going on.
right, right, that's why we do America's Untold Story, not all of them, there's a lot of great heroic stories that we've done, like David Steves and Smedley Butler and everything else, but that being said, there is dirt down there.
Right. Oh, somebody's complaining about, old Judith Mary Baker and Ed Haslam,
Yeah,
saying,
don't quit, folks. Don't
"What
quit.
what about Chauncey Holt?" They wanna know if we don't like Chauncey
Yeah,
Holt's.
he's on the list too. Holt's a fraud too.
Good, okay,
Yeah,
so we're covered.
Holt's on the list. Yeah, there are frauds out there, and you people are perpetuating their legends. So, tip of the hat to you for being someone who's a useful IDIOT.
ID10T? Yep. Let me turn myself down.
Yeah,
People are saying I'm louder than you, probably because I have a good microphone coming in.
probably because I don't have a microphone.
No, but you know what? We've gotten this far,
Right.
and it's done great. We've got a little bit of support that's come in, super chats, etc.
Okay.
Beverly Fitch gave us a courtesy super chat. Thank you very much.
What's a courtesy super chat?
I don't know, but it's very kind. Michael is a YouTube member now. Pasha.
This is the book I'd recommend as opposed to the Kinzer book. Well, you can read the Kinzer book. There's a lot of photos in there, good stuff. But there's stick with John Marks.
Definitely. Pasha, is there a Yiddish word of the day for what Wikipedia is doing? Surely there must be.
Don't call me Shirley. What's it called when you lie, Pasha? What's a lie in Yiddish? Well, let's just go with Schnorrer. We'll go with Schnorrer.
Schnorrer? Okay.
Yeah, he's a Schnorrer. Not him, but people. Gottlieb, I think, is a Schnorrer. He kind of disgraced his own people. He turns his back on his Orthodox Jewish family in the Bronx, and of course begins to embrace Buddhism and other world religions.
Well, what about hiring Nazis? I mean,
Well,
it's like that'd be a little uncomfortable there. It's like,
he's raised by Orthodox Jews. Of course, he's embarrassed by them, as other folks have been in the past. They turn their back on them, and they don't want to be connected with that ilk. So he begins to embrace other religions. Of course, ends up with none of them. Ends up being an atheist. Ends up being a communist, and ends up having no morality. His morality is decided by him. Is decided by him, and that morality allows you to hire Nazis, even though you're a Jew. I mean, think about how far of a bridge that is. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the Sidney Gottlieb. I think his brother is I don't know about his brother. David Gottlieb was a botanist or horticulturist. I'm not sure what happened to him. But this guy marries a Presbyterian minister's daughter.
Who was born in India.
Born in India. That's how far out this cat's going to get away from his smelly, old, Jewish, Orthodox, despicable, embarrassing family that he has in his mind, that raised him, sent him to college and gave him a life. He turns on them and begins to hire Nazis. Okay. What else can you say? How you doing? How's it going? Well, Ma, so far I've hired 5 Nazis this week. It's not so bad. Do you hire Kurt Bloom? Yeah, I hired Kurt Bloom. We told you not to hire Kurt Bloom. I know. He's one of the Nazi scientists. Ah, Ma, shut up. Let me do my job. I mean, what kind of conversation do you have with your parents in the Bronx when you're hiring Nazi scientists? That's what Pasha.
Love it. All right, we've got some tips in from locals, the exclusive tap. Jules A sent a $10 tip, watching live on Rumble, but can't rant on my TV.
Okay, no TV rant.
Okay. Somebody said, don't read my name on this one, LOL, but serious question. What if cell towers gone signals / 5G interacts with the VAX or something? And next. I'm not even.
I don't know. Don't read my name on that one either, Hunley.
How about I won't do the message. Mark, Grunt 167. Mark, have you ever considered this is all an ongoing acid trip you're on, and it's actually 1979?
I've never had flashbacks. I mean, people say they have flashbacks. I never had a flash. I wish I did, but I've never had any flashbacks, or I never had a bad trip. I don't know. I just I always enjoyed hallucinogens. I'm sorry to say, or I'm happy to say, any way you want to take it. So
better than the alternative.
What Gottlieb did, Gottlieb actually went down to Mexico with his crew and South America, looking for the most obscure hallucinogenic plants he could possibly find, and also poisons and toxins. I mean, they spent a lot of money and time going through South America and Mexico together as a team.
Butter clams that he
weird, right? Weird. Anything that he could get his hands on that he could kill somebody with or alter their consciousness. That was his superpower or dream. I mean, the guy had to be a sick fuck. I don't care. Kinzer says you can't really judge the morality of Gottlieb, and if he didn't do it, somebody else would have done it. Well, I mean, you could say that about Klaus Barbie too. You know what I mean? somebody else would have done it. But the point of the matter is, Sidney Gottlieb did do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird, weird dude. Multimax, great story. Again, guys, love your work. And as Mark mentioned last week, I'm yet to watch the program he recommended called Troppo, not Topo. Okay.
Trompo, we're not going to be able to see it. It's a series in Australia. No, it's not here. That's why you can't find it here. It's something Thomas Jane directed and starred in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Troppo being, I believe, the northernmost hot climate in Australia, and Troppo is when you go insane from the hot weather of the tropics of northern Australia. If I'm got the geography, we have a lot of fans in Australia. So
Which
if
is cool.
anybody gets, excuse me,
Which is awesome.
I know, no, we have a lot of fans in Australia. So if anybody's seen Troppo and wants to give us a brief take on it, I would appreciate it in the comment section down below. You may we may read it later on.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Peter Spalding with a super sticker. Thank you very much. Casey Moody finally caught y'all live.
Oh, live is better, right? Except when we're on the iPhone, the sound is not good. But how's the picture?
A picture's not bad at all. I think solid. Peter
right.
Spalding, it's another super sticker, so he one's up.
Is there a microphone you could attach to the iPhone? Like that little
Yes.
oh, there is. Okay. Well, maybe we should get that in case this ever happens again.
Yeah, I have one. Maybe I'll give it to you.
Okay. Is it that little shotgun mic I showed you or no?
No, it is a little shotgun mic, about this big. It's kind of like a round ball, but it serves as a shotgun mic. It flips over and
Oh,
works
all right.
very
Well,
well.
bring it to Vegas. We'll try it out in Vegas.
Okay.
Eric and I are going to Vegas to meet up again in Vegas in Meetup 2, The Reckoning, with Barnes and Viva, Mini Viva. I saw Mini Viva with
Russell Brand.
dude, that was an enormous contrast. I mean, Russell Brand's a tall guy, but Mini Viva, not to be confused with Mini Kiss, the band that was a tribute band of Little People of Kiss, which some people doubted existed until people in the comment section found it last week.
Well, it's actually funny because David was shorter than here's Russell Brand who's taller than Donald Trump Jr., who was also tall enough, and Kimberly was tall. So it's kind of like David is there with his parents, kind of wandering around.
You know, they have this procedure now where they lengthen your legs.
Yeah, they break it and then they break it again and break it. Yeah. Ugh, that seems just horribly creepy.
Yeah, they did that with one of my private parts, but
allegedly. Do you have any book recommendations for CIA bioweapon history? Well, John Marks.
Yeah, John Marks. Yeah, read that one. That's it. You can start with that. It's an easy read. Start with John Marks.
Who do you think was in control of Sirhan? William Joseph Bryan?
William Joseph Bryan, I believe, was the guy who was the Jolly West of his time. Master hypnotist, worked with F. Lee Bailey, hypnotized all kinds of people in demonstrations.
What's weird is their peers. Jolly West was born 2 years prior to Bryan.
Right.
So it's kind of I think that they were parallel tracks. So it's like one might have been doing something, the other doing another.
That he was that Bryan was before Jolly West. That Jolly West was still doing academic things like Oklahoma and eventually UCLA that Bryan was not doing. You know what I mean? That there was,
yeah, but you had that Texas pilot stuff at that time too that was kind of spooky. So I'm just wondering if they were just kind of running parallel tracks on different.
Well, keep in mind that Bryan is doing movie consulting with a number of films. I mean, Jolly West is not doing that. Jolly West is going through a straight academic track out in Oklahoma. You know,
it's wild.
Yeah,
but then you have Estabrook too. So there's a handful.
Right. Yeah, Estabrook is interesting.
Elizabeth Borson, 1990. Thank you very much. Gottlieb, as in the D Gottlieb and Gottlieb. I have no idea.
What is that?
I guess these are other Gottliebs. I don't think Gottlieb's
no, it's just
that uncommon name.
Him and the brother, I think, him and David.
Yeah.
Well, but he did have 2 or 3 kids, so I don't know what happened to them.
Could be D Gottlieb.
Yeah,
I don't know.
D Gottlieb, David Gottlieb. It could be the same. If you're looking them up in the phone book, I don't know what you're doing there, but
okay. Did you really spill your drink all over your lap and nice carpet? Laptop. I
No,
think
no, no, no.
I think you're talking about
Nothing
water
happened.
damage somehow in
No, no,
your
no. They were showing something that happened like, 5 years ago. It wasn't like it was. I think it's just a ripoff by Apple. I really don't believe that happened, but there's nothing I could do about it. I'm a I'm a prisoner of conscience now with Apple, so I got to pay and get out.
you pay your Pushcart Jimmy's a new member. Thank you very
Oh, welcome
much.
aboard.
Mark said today kids don't know shit from Shinola. They don't know what Shinola is. Good
Right.
point. So they
Very
wouldn't
good.
know it. Um, what do you think some regime adjacents like Jordan Peterson are pushing asses so hard? Oh, why? Yeah, there is that whole movement about PTSD and microdosing. It's all the new fad.
It's completely insane. I mean, therapists are recommending microdosing as a form of therapy. It's just a crapshoot. It's crazy. It's crazy. Who knows what that's going to trigger in your brain? You know what I mean? It's just like, what
Well,
do
you
you
can
take
say that
20
about
you take
lithium.
25
They like
micrograms?
drugs. They
What's that?
love drugs. You can
They
say that about
love dude,
lithium.
they
They love drugs.
love quick solutions,
Yeah.
and they believe I mean, taking 25 micrograms of LSD is not gonna, help you deal with your sexual molestation as a kid being abused by the babysitter. You're just gonna be in an altered state of consciousness, and, that's separate.
It's one of those rare cases where it's like Scientology's got a point.
They got a point. They really got these cats will not stop experimenting on human, clients with all kinds of drugs, and they talk to each other, and they go, "Yeah, let's try microdosing. How bad can it be? I like it. I've been taking some microdoses of acid. Why not the patient? How about it?" And they try that for a couple of years. I mean, they're as bad as the Nazi doctors.
Gamer got um I mean Sidney Gottlieb burned the MK Ultra records. That's what
That's
I
it.
was talking about in
What do you
73.
okay, right.
Let me see. Pasha. Mark, were you thinking of Lignar?
Lignar. That sounds vaguely familiar. Lignar. Okay, we'll go with Lignar as a lie, right? Is that what he's saying? Lignar is a lie?
I'm my Yiddish card is
It's full.
expired.
It's full.
Were there branches of the military that ran MK Ultra programs without MK Ultra personnel? I've read the Air Force's interest in this type of stuff. Well, coincidentally, Jolly West worked with the Air Force.
Right.
So,
They were spread
and the
out
Air
because
Force
Gottlieb worked
was
with the
under
Army.
the Army. Well,
Yeah,
the Air
Gottlieb
Force,
worked with the Army. West was with the Air Force. I don't know where everybody else was. I mean, we know that Oswald was ONI. That part of the program was an ONI program. So
also, the Air
okay.
Force was the Army Air Corps that became
Right.
the Air Force. So it just is continuation.
Right.
Bombs away LeMay came from the
Curtis
Army to the
LeMay.
Air Force. Yeah.
Curtis LeMay was obviously the head of the Air Force.
Right, and he was Army prior. So,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. That's right.
that's all I'm saying. So it only makes sense that there would be a, Elizabeth Borson, first time I watched your show live. Good, I hope you enjoy it.
It's much different live. All kinds of crazy crap goes on live.
Yeah, no kidding. We have no idea. And Pushcart Jimmy, $5. Thank you very much.
Oh, Pushcart Jimmy.
And that is it for now. So Friday
What
is
about Friday?
Freeform Friday. I don't know if Barnes is going to make it though, because he was saying some stuff like I think he's in Austin all week and doing a lot of depositions or something. I don't know if there's
I
going to
see.
be
I see.
a um, but we'll be here and we'll definitely put out and see.
Right. Well, I mean, thank you for the book donations. If you want to keep getting me some CIA books, it's not just Oswald and JFK books, by the way, through the book fund and PayPal and Venmo. It gets
All
me
books.
what's that? Yeah, it gets me the CIA books. It gets me the John Marks books. I appreciate if you want to donate money for the book fund. It's at PayPal or Venmo down below. You could see the links there. And you want to follow me at Lord Buckley on Twitter. I'll try not to block you, depending on the mood. I am obviously a moody, a moody boomer. So, yeah, you want to do that. Obviously, Eric has some items he'd like to tell you about. And we're seeing a lot of pictures of these animals, Eric, together. People are showing us Oswald with the Groubert in weird places now. Look at this.
Yeah, with Groubert having its own T-shirt.
Yeah, look at that. How do you like that?
Oswald is the rock star, though.
Right.
And we, of course, we have the new glasses that we've been talking about, like the it's hard to
Now
show them on here.
what's the status of the JFK trading cards?
They have to be completed.
Oh, that's a step.
Yeah, I have some of the images, but the descriptions have to be written. I need to find the guy to help me write the descriptions and make them make sense.
Wait a minute! Don't drag me into this operation. Now, what about the poker chips? I like the poker chips.
Okay, well, this is exclusive to Vegas, so
Right. Let me see one of the poker chips on me.
I wasn't I didn't want people to feel bad that aren't going to be there, but we're giving these away when we go to Vegas.
Oh wow! Look at that. That's a real chip.
Yeah.
Oh my! Bravo! Bravo!
And I might get another run for others if they want to get them or something, but the ones for Vegas are going to be this set, I think. So that way they're exclusive. The only places they're going to
Now,
get.
what about the bookmarks? You also have professional.
Yes, I have a couple thousand bookmarks, so we give away all kinds of bookmarks there.
I could use those, that's for sure.
I might even open that up for locals people to just send in their address or something and just mail it out.
I'm going to try to find this 5-page article from High Times on for locals, for our local,
yes, please do.
Local membership only.
Mark, do you believe Alan Dulles was motivated to hire and support the Gottlieb programs with the hope it would directly benefit his son's recovery from TBI suffered in Korean War?
Wait, what is this? I don't know anything about that. I don't know.
Maybe, but I'm going to
TBI. What is TBI?
A traumatic brain injury, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. You think acid would help that?
I don't know. I think that Dulles is probably a genuine cold warrior who was wanting the enemy to die.
He would have Sunday brunch with his brother, who is the Secretary of State, and the brother would then have a meeting weekly with President Eisenhower. So Gottlieb was literally 2 degrees of separation from Eisenhower, because Gottlieb and Dulles would talk once a week, and then the brother and him would talk once a week.
And there's Eisenhower with Dulles.
Yeah, with John Foster Dulles.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Secretary of State. Yeah, very, 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 very internal, small group of brains there.
Yep. So on that note,
okay,
Friday, Freeform.
Freeform Friday from a cabin in the mountains.
We hope.
We hope. We hope.
Everybody, wish Mark safety, and we will see you then.
All right, Hunley.